Nissan 200SX in Go Faster Green. I've already done a lot of welding to this car, sills and floors particularly, but today I'm repairing the outer arch. For the most part, the arch isn't that bad from first inspection, but we've been down this salty road before. I've just uncovered a previous repair, which is nice, and you can see that there is too much filler in the area and the arch has been pushed inward. Using the Elka meter, I can tell the extent of the damaged panel and it goes back as far as the door. The only way I can tell how much the arch is pushed inward is to remove the filler. Yes, I'm 40 years old and going grey, and this really isn't helping. Having removed the filler, we can see the panel has been stretched and needs to be shrunk if it's going to look right again. How this dent has been pulled out is via self-tapping screws. Some of the holes have been welded back up, some have not. It's a method I've seen in the past, but I was never tempted to use this method. The straight edge shows where the arch has been pushed inward and where it is still correct. Luckily, the driver only took a dislike to the off side of the car and the near side is still in good condition for comparison purposes. If this car was Italian, that might not be the case. So I need to measure the length of the arch I'm going to replace, and I'm doing so with a tape measure, demonstrating with superb skill. This sort of talent does not come overnight, and it's not as easy as I'm making it look. This is the bar, people. I know what you're thinking. How will I ever get to this level? If I was just to cut and weld a new strip of metal without a fold, I would have to contend with distortion like this. The arch lip will want to bow inward, so a folded section makes for an easier life. I'm only going to have a 10mm fold, and this will make bending the section easy work. I must say, these odd leg calipers are superb. It doesn't fit well at the moment, but it soon will. I'm using a stretcher to bend the folded section, and only roughly to begin with. I place the piece up against the car and hold my finger where I want to make a bend. Make a reference line so you can place the arch back in the same place each time. Failing to do so will make life hard for you. Then it's just back and forth until you end up with something like this. I've clamped the new outer arch section to the inner arch and I'm scribing a cut line. But before I cut it, I want to check there aren't any electrical wires or cables running inside the car. This is a cheap phone operated endoscope and it works well for the bargain price of £20. I'm able to verify there aren't any wires so I can continue, but cutting as shallow as I can. We can see a foam material that needs to be removed before welding. I really like these grinder powered zip wheels, but unfortunately the feeling isn't mutual. There's a bit of inner arch to repair and I have to confess I cut into the inner arch a little bit. While I have access, I'll straighten out some of the damaged quarter panel. I've welded the inner arch in the way I've said not to in the beginning, but I've left the part much wider so heat shrinking has less of an effect. Plug holes punched and I can start welding. First, one outer tack, but then clamped on the lip. I need to make sure the position in and out lines up with the rest of the car, then I can start plug welding, but checking all the time this position. Looking front and back and with a straight edge where possible. For the most part, the new lip is overlapping the rest of the wing, and this is what I want at this stage. I want the arch to nicely butt up against the inner arch without any forcefulness. If you do the butt welding first, you can get a situation where force is needed to bring the inner and outer arch together. Force equals metal distress. Metal distress equals mental distress. There's a little section between two plug welds that I want to bring out. I can tap it out with the clamp attached and the clamp will hold it in the new position. Now all the plug welds are complete, I can recut the join to make a 1mm welding gap. Using the old wing as a guide, I can adjust the new lip so it lines up. Any bits where I think the old wing should come out to the new lip I can prise out with a small screwdriver and tack in place. Once enough tacks are holding it, the welding process is pretty quick. I always weld in an anti-clockwise direction just to save time. Let the welds cool down between tacking. When I say cool down, I mean stone cold. And there is our fully welded arch. Once the welding has fully dried, I can start grinding. I go this far with the electric grinder and then switch to the air-powered one. After the air-powered one, it looks like this, and then the air sander with 36 grit sanding discs. Very minimal distortion. No more than 0.5 mm I would suggest. So very little for the painter to do. I've also finished up the bottom section where the mud flap attaches. If you struggle drilling square holes, try thinking inside the box. I'm going to rectify this stretched area panel because it's pretty bad. To do this, I'm going to shrink it with heat. It can be a bit daunting attempting this technique, but there's very little to be afraid of. Just start slow.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Try not to let much heat build up into the panel. You want the torch to be hot, and I'm using oxypropane with a small nozzle. I want intense heat in a small area. I don't air quench, but I do use air to cool the panel for progress checking. After a few shrinks, I can see there is a long way to go on this panel. There is a low spot which I can push out with the dolly while hitting inward on the high spots, and this will help the cause. It's surprising how far away the low spot from the high spot can be and still bring both in the correct direction. It's taken a couple hours to get this far and it's nearly there. The last thing to do is protect the steel with Built Hamber Hydrate 80.